Hi, and welcome to When Bad Things Happen to Good People, a podcast about censorship in the arts. My name is Oren Barter. With me, as always, is Todd Sullivan.
Hello!
And today we're going to look at Antoine, it's a little hard to say, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's children's book, The Little Prince.
Yeah, that author pronunciation is exactly why I asked you to take it.
You're like, if someone's going to fuck up, it better just be you.
Exactly.
Everybody expects that, so we'll just hand that off.
No, I didn't have his name written down, so I wouldn't have even been prepared to say it, so I'm...
The only reason I remembered it was because I Googled it 20 times before the podcast just to bring up just everything. I kept calling him Alexander, and I was like, why isn't it coming up? But it's because his name is Antoine.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's a good life hack for using Google is
use the right
whatever
name
you're searching for properly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, use the actual name.
Mm-hmm. It helps.
Tremendously.
Yeah, that and quotation marks if you're looking for something specific.
Yeah, well, quotation marks make sure that those words appear exactly in that order.
Yeah, and
rather. Than in any order at all, right?
I like when you're like Googling something, you type it in, and then you just get a bunch of like search results that have nothing to do with the main key thing you were trying to search. It's like the only thing missing from all of the search results is like the number one thing you were trying to find. I love that.
I love just starting a Google search and seeing what comes up as like suggested ways to finish it, because you get some odd stuff in there sometimes. In fact, there was a period, I don't know, it's probably like 10 years ago now, where people were like doing Google poetry, where they would like type in the beginning of a phrase, and then they would screenshot like the next 4 suggested things and like turn that would be the poem, right?
That would be the poem.
Yeah. Here, let me just do a quick Google poem here. What should we search for? What is the meaning of...
Okay.
What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of symbol? What is the meaning of love? What is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything?
That's not bad.
That's the poem, yeah.
It's not bad.
How you doing, Oren?
I'm doing okay. Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad.
Me too. How are you, Todd?
I was.
Oh, you were going to ask me
sure
another
you were
question?
Going to ask. I wasn't.
Oh.
No, I wasn't sure you were going to ask. I was waiting. And,
no. I wasn't, and then I was like, it would be rude if I didn't. So I thought, I'll throw him a bone.
I'm okay. I'm a little bit tired these days. As I think you saw, I've been spending some of my recreational time engaging with the anti-vaccination community on Facebook.
Oh, isn't that fun?
And
isn't that so fun?
It's a little exhausting at this point after 18 months of this, and now being in British Columbia here on the verge of the vaccine passports coming next month. This just being a continuation of, this whole problem existing because of people who have been denying the science and avoiding the vaccines and complaining about masks and everything else.
Yeah, and now they're just using their own consequences as evidence, which is doubly infuriating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is why today my coffee has a little splash of chocolate mint Kahlua in it. So
gotcha. Okay.
Gotta lower those stress levels or whatever. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good. I've been busy, hard at work on the Tell a Story Hive project that we've got going on over at Half Cut. And I think we're finally finished shooting that, except for doing the intro and outro stuff. So I've just been sort of madly editing our visit to the Sagebrush Theater for ghost hunting. That was wild. That was fun. It'll be out on TELUS Optic TV in the fall. I'm not sure when quite yet, but
sweet.
Been having a ball.
Nice.
Anything exciting going on in your world?
Back on the wagon. So
Cool.
Right now I'm drinking tea and CBD drink instead of alcohol.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, tea is nice. CBD is nice.
It is. Yeah. Gets me mellow. Makes me tired. makes me want to eat.
Those are all some of my favorite things, like, relaxing and eating.
Relaxing and eating, yeah.
Those are two of my favorite things.
And not, being, what's the word I'm looking for?
Hungover?
Just completely frozen with existential dread. That's nice when you don't have to do that.
Well, what are we here to do?
We're here to talk about The Little Prince.
We're here to chew bubblegum and talk about banned books, and I, sir, am all out of bubblegum.
Okay, so let's talk about a banned book then.
Let's do it.
I guess we'll talk about why it was banned and how it's different from other books that we've done probably after.
Yeah, this you spotted, I think, the last episode we did, or maybe the one before that this book was banned, and you were like, I want to do this one because you're a fan of this book. And it wasn't until I actually looked into it that in discovering that it was banned, that I realized that it was banned for slightly different reasons than most of the ones that we've done before. And most of the ones we've done before are like content related.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's a little bit different, but you go ahead with how you want to approach the book.
Yeah. I mean, it's a children's book. It's very different from anything else I've ever read. It's, I think, a very unique book. Not a whole lot of structure involved in it. Seems to go in a lot of different directions. Introduces some zany characters that just kind of float off into obscurity after they're introduced. Some real kind of throwaway conversations that don't really help the plot, but are just kind of these sweet little, I don't know. It's a very interesting book.
It was not what I was expecting. I'd never read this book before, and I knew literally nothing about it. And I didn't even Google it at all before reading it. So I didn't know what to expect. And, when you hear a title like The Little Prince, you assume it's going to be about some prince in some kingdom on, some place, either on Earth or in a fairy tale place. And it's not really that. And, it's also my takeaway. I shouldn't say my takeaway, because I actually had this idea about halfway through, even before I got to the end. It was this seems like a lot of words just to say, grown-ups sure do have weird priorities.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of the underlying, the theme of the book.
Yeah, it's like even right from the beginning, the narrator himself is I tried to draw this picture of an elephant inside of a snake.
Well, he wanted to draw a scary picture because he heard that a snake will eat its prey and then digest it for a month.
Right.
So he was he wanted to draw the scariest picture he could draw. So he drew a snake that ate an elephant. And all the adults were like, what are you doing? I don't want to see this picture of a hat.
Yeah.
So then he drew drawing number 2, which was kind of an X-ray shot of the snake with the elephant in its guts. And they didn't like that one either, so he gave up on his career as an artist.
And also sort of gave up on grown-ups understanding the things that kids do. It's wow, grown-ups just don't understand. Well, maybe if you learn to draw better, kid. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it starts out, talking about his early love of drawing and then how he kind of gave up on that and he went and did, regular school stuff like reading, writing, arithmetic, geography. And then he says that he's a pilot, so geography actually came in handy.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually was, the author was a pilot.
Yeah.
So he's drawing from real world experience there.
And he had a crash fairly similar to the one that this character has in this book too. He ended up crashing in the desert.
Yeah. And that's where I don't know how long it hangs on the adults are weird. He talks about how adults love numbers and how numbers really don't mean anything. Feelings have more value than numbers, but you can't talk to adults in that way. You have to use a number. You have to be he talks about this guy who discovered a little asteroid and he named it I can't remember what it was. And nobody took him seriously because he was dressed different and the name he gave it wasn't scientific. and he went to he went to a different conference, and he was forced to wear like Western attire. And I mean, obviously, this isn't true, right? This is just for the book, but
yeah.
I don't think this is true anyway. And he gives the asteroid a number, B something, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's an amazing discovery! Congratulations!" So kind of early on, he sets this like this idea that people are hung up on the wrong things.
Yeah, he does that same kind of example with a house, where he gives the example that if somebody tried to explain the house as like describing the shrubs on the lawn or like the kind of siding it has or anything like that, the grown-ups would be like, I don't know what kind of house that is. But if you were to go and say, "Oh, I saw this beautiful house for $20,000,"
or it was $1 million. It was $1 million.
I'm pretty sure it was $20,000.
No, it was maybe they changed.
Because I was like, that is a really low number for a house. But then this book was written in like 1930 something, I think. So
1940 something. Yeah, this is just before the end of World War II.
Yeah.
A few years before.
But the point is that like I would have gotten a better picture of the house from the actual description than the money description. So I don't know what he's talking about or what parents those are or what grown-ups those are that he's talking to, because I think that's a bit of a straw man argument there myself. But
I mean, yeah, for sure. But that's the kind of theme he wanted for the book. He was asked to do a children's book by his publishers, and this is what he came up with, and it was, that's how he introduced the grown-ups in this world. So after he introduced his drawings and his displeasure for adults, he says he kept his like drawing number 1 and number 2 with him, and he would show them, and if they'd be like, "Why are you showing me this drawing of a hat?" he would put the drawing back in his pocket and then discuss politics and like income and things, adult things, and the person you were talking to would be very happy to meet such a reasonable man.
Yes.
But so then he ends up crashing in the desert, with no tools, no one around, a limited supply of food and water, and he comes across a blonde, curly-haired little boy who turns out to be the little prince.
Not the sort of person you would normally expect to encounter in the desert.
Yeah, and the first thing he asks him, he's like, "Can you draw me a sheep?" Right? He just
right out of the bat, this prince is clearly used to like just get in his way. "Hello, sir. Draw me a sheep. Chop chop."
So like he doesn't know what to make of it. He decides to draw a sheep, and the prince says, "No, that one is much too big. It needs to be smaller." So then he draws another one. And the prince is like, no, that is not a sheep. That's a ram. See, it's got horns. And then he draws a third one. And the prince goes, "No, this one's sickly. I want a young one that's going to live for a long time." And the third one did look a little old. And then so finally he's frustrated. He just draws a crate with some air holes in it and hands it to the prince and says, "There, your sheep's inside that crate." And the prince goes, "Oh, it's perfect. It's exactly the right size. It's nice and young. It's a perfect sheep." Kind of going back to that elephant being swallowed by a boa constrictor, right?
Well, I think too, it's the idea that the imagination is able to create whatever you want it to, right? Like if I draw a sheep, then your imagination is locked into whatever that version of the sheep is. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I draw a box and tell you that there's a sheep inside that box, you can create whatever picture of that sheep that you want to, and that sheep can then be perfect. And then if I put a nuclear pellet with a half-life in that box as well, and the box has a 50% chance of either releasing that or not releasing that, Schrodinger's sheep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from there, I think the little prince starts... I mean, I guess the guy draws a few more things from him, but really the story is the little prince sort of telling his stories of bounding through the universe, because it turns out the Little Prince is not actually from Earth.
And Antoine had to figure that out. He didn't know, like, the prince wouldn't outright say pretty much anything. He wouldn't answer any questions. So based on what the Little Prince would say to him, like, no, my place is much too small. I can't have a large sheep, or, I want to see the sunset. And he's like, well, it's in the middle of the day. We're not going to see a sunset. And he's like, well, where I'm from, I just turned my chair and then I'm looking at the sunset instead of the sunrise. And so he kind of pieces all this together. Mm-hmm. And then they just end up spending like more and more time together. And he's trying to fix his plane and he's getting frustrated. And yeah, then it kind of jumps. Yeah, like you said, to kind of describe the Little Prince leaving his home asteroid and bounding across the universe or galaxy or solar system. I don't think that's really
whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
From what I recall, his planet was basically, it was very small. Like you said, you could watch the sun go down and then turn your chair and pretty much watch the sun come up again immediately. There was one flower on it that had thorns.
And it was really vain. It was like, it thought it was the only flower of its kind in the universe. And it would lie. And to make itself seem more important than it is, it would say that it wasn't afraid of tigers. It was an interesting rose. It was beautiful.
It doesn't need to be afraid of tigers, though, because there were no tigers.
There were no tigers.
The Little Prince's planet. So, and there were also 3 volcanoes, one of which was dormant.
But you never know.
You never know. And they were small enough that because he talks about using the volcanoes as footstools, too.
He used the dormant one as a stool. And then the chimney sweep his 3 volcanoes, the 2 active ones, and then the dormant one, because you never know.
Yeah.
And because every time he talks about it, he adds that little, because you never know.
It's true.
And then he has to dig up all the baobab saplings. And if you don't know what a baobab tree is, they're in Africa, I believe, those great big white trunk, tall motherfuckers, massive trees. And of course, on a planet that you could walk around in a matter of minutes, that would not be a good thing to have growing there.
Yeah, you don't need too many trees on a planet like that.
No, I think, 0 baobabs would probably be the best. So he has to dig up the baobab shoots, sweep his volcanoes, water his rose. Or I guess, sorry, we don't know what's a rose at this point. It's just water his unique flower.
Spoiler alert.
And then he gets kind of sick of the flower. He gets kind of tired of her and her vanity and her cutting words. She tears him down, and she's very needy. She needs him to cover her at night with a glass dome so she doesn't get cold.
Right.
And as much as she tries to say that she's strong and not afraid of anything, she really desperately needs assistance in a lot of things. And I actually read, and obviously it's anything like this, if it doesn't come from the author's mouth, is just, hearsay. But a lot of people believe he was writing about his wife, that the rose was his wife. And she actually wrote a book called A Tale of the Rose after his death. So he gets tired of the rose, and he decides to go see the universe. So he catches a ride with a flock of migrating birds.
Yeah, as you do.
I mean, how else are you going to leave an asteroid? I mean, space birds.
Space birds, yeah.
Space birds. And I don't have a list of the planets that he goes to. I could bring the book up and we could run, as it's super short. Each one is like 1 page.
Yeah. He gets about 7 or 8 different planets.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we don't have to go through them in order. We could just talk about our favorite ones. I would say my favorite one was the king, who thought he ruled over everything. but would only give demands that were reasonable.
Right, yeah, exactly. Because if he ordered something and it wasn't reasonable, then it was his fault, not the other person's fault. And that's pretty smart for a king, I will say.
Yeah.
to demand that like you grow an extra arm out of your head is not a reasonable demand. And if your subject cannot do it, it's more his fault than yours.
Yep. But it's like a double-edged sword too, because he's like, the prince is like, well, what do you rule? Do you have power over the stars? And he's like, of course I do. The stars listen to me. I just can't ask them to do anything that they can't do.
Exactly, right?
And so the prince asked to see
I will command the sun to come up as long as I do it at exactly the right time.
Yep, exactly. When conditions are favorable.
Yep.
So that was I thought that was a silly little thing.
I think my favorite was kind of in the same lines as far as silliness goes. I like the geographer who doesn't know where anything is because he's never been anywhere. He's not an explorer. He doesn't go out and find things. He's just the geographer. He's the one who keeps track of these things when people bring them back to him.
Yeah.
And since no one has done that yet, he doesn't know any geography.
He doesn't even know the geography of his own planet.
Yep.
The prince is like, are there any mountains on your planet? Oh, I don't know that. Are there any rivers on your planet? Oh, I don't know that. Yeah, that was pretty funny. And then the drunkard, that was kind of sad.
Yeah, the drunkard who drinks to forget the shame of drinking.
Yeah.
According to Wikipedia, that's their description of it.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what he says. He's like, why do you drink? Because I'm ashamed. And the prince is like, what are you ashamed of? Drinking. And the prince is like, okay, good luck with that. Bye.
That reminds me of a comic strip I did once where a character was like, I drink to forget. And the other person says, what are you trying to forget? And the other guy says, I don't remember.
Must have worked.
Must have worked. But I got to keep going. Otherwise, it might come back.
Yeah. That's funny.
There's also a narcissistic man who only wants the praise, which comes from admiration and being the most admirable person on the otherwise uninhabited planet.
Yeah.
I'm reading these from Wikipedia.
He's the wealthiest, handsomest, most admirable man on his planet. And the prince says, you're the only man on your planet. He's like, well, that doesn't matter. I'm still the best.
Right, exactly.
So that's kind of like little fish, big pond, or big fish, little pond.
Then there was a businessman who is blind to the beauty of the stars and instead endlessly counts and catalogs them in order to own them all.
Mm-hmm.
And a lamplighter on a planet so small, a full day lasts a minute.
Oh no, yeah, the poor guy. He couldn't get any sleep because he's like, it used to be nice. It turned a lot slower before, but it just keeps getting faster and faster. I wonder if that was like a euphemism for the modern world.
Yeah, like the Industrial Revolution, the way things speed up as we've made technological progress has diminished our quality of life, right?
And then, so the geography, I think, was the last planet that he went to before heading to Earth because the prince is like, I want to meet some friends. I want to go on an adventure. And the geographer is like, well, I've heard of this place called Earth. Go check that out.
Yep.
So he does.
Bounding way to Earth, lands in a desert, meets a snake.
Was that? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was the first thing he met. Was the snake who told him that he could take him home?
Yeah.
Which I doubt. I doubt that very much, Mr. Snake.
Well, isn't that what happens at the end though?
Yeah, so I think you probably read the book as most people read it, thinking that the prince went home. When I read it the first time, I cried. But we'll get to that.
Okay. All right.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. It's very sad, and Oren cried.
Yeah. So he decides to hit a road. He knows all roads lead to people. I don't know how he knows that. Was there roads?
He's never been on a planet with a road on it before.
Yeah. And wouldn't the weight of gravity just crush him?
How does he understand the concept of people?
Yeah. How does he?
He's never even encountered a planet with more than one person.
Yeah. And I mean, he can just breathe our air. There's a lot of holes.
There's
a lot of scientific plot holes. in this book.
A lot of holes. Exactly. How did he communicate with the space birds?
Maybe,
space birds don't speak English.
Maybe he was just really good at lassoing. Just like, whoosh, 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 wah! Space birds.
So he comes across the snake, and then he finds rose bushes.
Right. Yeah, he finds rose bushes. So thousands of flowers, just like his flower.
Yep.
And they're all super vain. And then, yeah, that's when he realizes that his flower isn't unique at all. And yeah.
And that makes him sad. So he starts crying, and then he meets a fox.
Yes. And the fox wants him to tame him.
Yes.
Yeah. Which was odd. It was like, I know what we can do. You should tame me so we're not strangers anymore. And then when you go, I'll miss you. That sounds fantastic.
Well, I think that's part of the bigger picture of, and this connects to the rose too. This idea that by caring for a single thing, you make that thing unique and separate from what it is as a whole of other things, right?
Yeah.
The flower on his planet is unique to him and is special to him compared to the bunches of roses.
Yeah, because he spent time
it was something
with that
he
one.
took.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's also the lesson he takes by taming the fox and learning to, that the fox will miss him and he'll miss the fox when they go their separate ways.
And I think like the thing about the wheat and being golden like his hair, and how whenever he looks at wheat now, it's just wheat. It doesn't mean anything to him. He can't eat it. It has no use to him. But after knowing, and it's weird that he has like this kind of foresight into what he's going to miss about the prince as soon as he meets him. But yeah, so the fox says, but once you tame me, I'll look at the wheat and I'll remember you. And then the wheat will have meaning to me. So yeah. And it's kind of there's a lot of sweet sentiments in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then he goes and sees the people. And I don't think he likes them much.
No, there's a railway switchman who is basically tunneling or moving passengers from one place to another, except nobody's ever satisfied with where they're going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like everybody from position or point A wants to go to point B, and everybody from point B wants to go to point A, and nobody's happy wherever they are. Basically is what it is.
Yeah. It's like I don't know if it's a joke or what, but the idea of like you're in the military and your superior officer's like, go there, dig a hole, and you go dig a hole, and he's like, okay, go fill in that hole.
Right.
And it's a waste of time. Your life is meaningless. You're just moving from one place to another, unless you create the meaning for your life by, having a special thing, having a rose, taming a fox. Like these are the things that actually give your life meaning, I think is what the book is going for from these comparisons.
Yeah, no, for sure. That was a very Canadian saying. Yeah, no, for sure, eh?
Yeah, no, for sure.
How does that go? It's like, yeah, no, for sure is like absolutely. Yeah, no is no.
No, but there's also no, yeah.
Yeah, which is yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, for sure.
Next he encounters a merchant who has invented a pill that eliminates the need to drink, saving people exactly 53 minutes every week.
Yeah. And he's like, what are you going to do with that time? The little prince was like, I think I'll use that time to walk slowly to a water fountain.
Yeah.
So he doesn't get any water pills, which would have been very helpful in the desert.
Yeah, because of course our narrator, and I shouldn't say main character, but the narrator is at this point, we cut back to the present day in the desert. It's the 8th day that they've been there, and they're both very thirsty. But the prince is like, let's go look for a well. And the other guy's sort of like, I guess we might as well. We don't have a better idea.
Well, I think he starts off. Sorry, I'm mid-yawn there. I think he starts off. The prince wants him to draw him a muzzle for the sheep, so the sheep doesn't kill his flower.
Right.
And And is that it? I think I might be mixing two things up, but I know he does get quite upset with the prince at one point. Like, that doesn't matter. I'm thirsty. I'm dying. I need to fix this plane. I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
And the prince is like, you don't know anything about what's important. Somewhere out there is a flower that needs me. It's the most beautiful flower, and that's what's important. And then, yeah, he's like, okay, let's go look for a well.
So they do end up looking for a well, and they do manage to find one out in the middle of the desert, much to their excitement. And then they talk about how sweet the water tasted. I'm not sure if that was because of, I mean, obviously to an extent, it's because they haven't had water in 8 days, and that's going to have. But I think there was something else there,
was
too.
A few different things. Yeah, I think it was the fact that they found it together. The fact and being together, looking for the well, looking for water, and needing water. All those things made it very important. And the sound of the pulley, the squeak of the pulley, was like music. You know, you waiting for that water to come up, that anticipation, right? All those things kind of led to that being a real bonding moment for the two of them. Antoine starts to get this weird feeling. The prince says, like, this is where I came here a year ago. I need to.
And so, yeah, now everything's going to be aligned for me to, like, get off the planet again, right?
Right. That's what he says. And then he tells Antoine to go work on his plane. He needed to stay there. So Antoine leaves reluctantly, goes to his plane, manages to find the one part that he really needs, and is excited to tell the little prince the next day. He heads up to where he left him. He finds the little prince up on a in the painting anyway. He was up on a wall talking to somebody, and he couldn't see who he was talking to. And the prince was saying, "Are you sure it's not going to hurt too bad?" And, you know, all this stuff. Kind of like, we were set up pretty early, a lot of foreshadowing with the snake. And he finds out that it was a snake. It was a very venomous snake that he was talking to. And he kind of pieces together what the prince is planning. And he tries to talk the prince out of it. The prince says, this is just a body. What's truly important is invisible.
And then the snake bites him and he dies.
There was something in between there, I thought. I mean, I can't remember what it was, though.
I don't think there's much of anything.
Not, yeah.
It's the conversation they have. And then he's like, sort of like, what does he say? The Wikipedia says, the prince consoles the narrator by saying that he'll need to look at the stars to think of the prince's lovable laughter, and that it will seem as if all the stars are laughing. And then he wanders off, and the snake bites him, and he falls down.
Right.
And then from there, I think I don't remember if the narrator goes back to his plane or stays there in the desert, but the next morning he tries to look for the prince's body and can't find it. Returns to his plane, which he did manage to repair, and flies home again.
But he doesn't only hear laughter when he looks at the stars. Because he doesn't know, because he forgot to give the prince the picture of the muzzle. So he doesn't know if the prince is up on his...
No, it wasn't that. It was he gave the prince the picture of the muzzle, but he had drawn it wrong. There wasn't a strap on it.
He didn't add the strap.
So the muzzle couldn't be attached to the sheep, and so he has no way of knowing whether the sheep maybe did eat the flower one day, or, you know, maybe, yeah, there's all these sort of questions in the air,
right,
of what happened with the sheep and the flower and the... I mean, personally, I don't think a sheep that
Schrodinger's flower.
Only on a piece of paper, and even then, only inside of a box on a piece of paper, whether that sheep is capable of eating a flower in reality. But that's a bigger question than I'm prepared to answer right
now. Yeah, so he looks at the stars. Sometimes he hears laughter. Sometimes he hears crying. And he tries not to think about the rose dying and the prince being sad about that. And yeah, I mean...
And then he does sort of, I guess the very final lines in the book are that, you know, if you find yourself out there in the middle of the desert and you encounter a small person with blonde hair who doesn't answer questions, then...
it's a great description of him.
It's possible you've encountered this little prince as well. Now, regarding his death / return home, which is sort of what you were talking about earlier, where there's sort of two ways to interpret it, and for myself, I kind of interpret them both at the same time. Like my read was that he got bitten by the snake, but where he came from was a place more like the drawings on paper.
Mm-hmm.
His time in reality was really only spent on Earth.
Oh,
so when the snake bit him, he releases this mortal form of himself, and then returns to his plane, which is a more imaginary plane.
Okay, I didn't see it that way.
Okay.
I mean, I just kind of assumed within the scope of the book that the prince was real, that his asteroid was real, because Antoine does say that he thinks he figures out which asteroid was his, B612 or something like that. But when it didn't hit me as hard this time because I've read it a few times. But I know the very first time that I read it, it just the reality to me was the snake tricked the little prince, told him I could send you home. Right, and the little prince believed him and ended up basically committing suicide.
That's very dark.
Yeah,
man.
that's why I cried the first time I read this book.
It's very dark, and I don't think that lines up with anything else this book is trying to say.
It doesn't, but it's just so sad.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you look at it that way, but that's why I'm arguing maybe for a different interpretation, because
but
I don't think
some do say that Antoine was quite depressed and he may have committed suicide in his final crash.
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about the fact that Antoine disappears eventually
over the Mediterranean.
So, because before we get to that, we should talk about why the book was banned. Okay. And it's because he was basically kicked out of France.
Well, he left France.
He left France, but he was in exile. Like France would basically fuck off. Don't come back.
Because France at that time was governed by. Let me see if I think I've got it up here. Vichy France. It was like
so France had signed an armistice or a treaty with Nazi Germany during the war, and Antoine was having none of that. He's like, "Fuck this, I'm out of here." And France was like, "Fine, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out." And so he was basically not allowed back in France, and France went so far as to be like, "This book you wrote that everyone thinks is so awesome, well, we don't think it's so great, and we're not going to release it." F you.
Yeah, which is, like you said, very different than any other reason we've had for a banning on this show.
But it's also interesting because it is, in a way, politically motivated, in which is similar to a lot of the bannings, is that they are, in some ways, political. And in this case, it's just political because this is a writer who is opposed to the current political regime in France, which in this particular case is connected to the Nazis, who I think we all kind of acknowledge now were terrible people.
Yes.
And then, to my understanding, not long after finishing the book, he ended up signing up with some kind of military group or like volunteer military group in the U.S., even though he was. It was
the free. What was it? The Free something of France. So they were all pilots from France, flying out of South America, I believe.
And he disappeared on one of those flights.
His body was never found. Somebody did find his bracelet. So it's very similar to. I'm not saying that he had pre-planned for his bracelet to be found or something stupid like that, but it's an interesting union of reality and fiction there.
It is, in the same way that, the little prince just kind of, got bit by the snake and then disappeared. You could say that Antoine was bitten by the snake of Nazi Germany and then disappeared. Yeah.
He never did get to see his book published in his home country, which he loved. He loved France. I read a lot about, and I think I want to read some more of his books because this one is very interesting.
I really, I can't say that I thought this was a particularly great book. I stand by my position that it's a lot of words to basically come to the conclusion that adults have weird priorities. And that's, I do think that's the overall message of the book. And that includes things like, you're too worried about, you've invented a pill to save 53 minutes of time a week, but no one has any plan to do anything like fulfilling or enriching with those extra 53 minutes. So what was the point? In the grand scheme of things, it's better to get that drink of water and have that experience of the sweet, cool water than it is to say 53 minutes that you're just going to spend, cataloging more stars for no reason. Right. But I will say that I thought this book was very well written structurally. I found it very lyrical. I found it kind of almost, what's the word I'm looking
whimsical?
For? Like it was very light. It was musical.
Whimsical.
It was, whimsical. Yeah, that's another good word. Which struck me as unique as well, because I don't often, and I haven't read a lot of books that have been translated, but in the ones that I have read, you don't always get that same sense of lyricism, because it's sometimes the job of translating a book is just to sort of take that foreign sentence, which probably was lyrical in its original language, but now you have to make it mean something in a different language, which may not have that same lyricism just because the words aren't there. So maybe it's the simplicity of a children's book that gives the person doing the translation more wiggle room in picking the right words. But I did find this was, for a translated book, exceptionally interesting to read from a language sense.
And it's been translated into 300 different languages.
Well, I didn't think they were going to stop at just one.
But did you think they were going to go all the way to 300?
Well, I think they would. There's a better chance of going to 300 than just stopping at 299. You get to 299 and you're like, fuck, let's get one more. Come on.
Yeah.
Get an even number in here.
I wonder what the 300th. I'm not going to look that up.
That's probably one of the things you couldn't find on Google. Maybe you could.
Let's try. Okay. What was the third Riddick film? No. 300th language that the Little Prince was translated into. Yeah, a North African variant of Arabic. Hassania.
All right, well, there you go.
You can find everything on Google.
I guess you can.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This book hits a certain key for me. It's not like, you say, it doesn't have a particularly profound message, I don't think. At least not on its surface. But I do find that there's just something in the way that it makes you feel. And then maybe I was in a particularly vulnerable state when I read it the first time, which is why I took the darker interpretation. But yeah, that emotional roller coaster from reading it then is not something I'll ever forget. This book is always gonna just be there in my memories. Well,
and I think there are, for everyone, there are certain, whether they're books or films or TV shows or albums that hit you at a particular time where it connects to you in a unique way, where you're always going to have a unique connection to that piece of art that maybe not everyone else would. I remember I read a book in my early 20s that really connected with what I was going through at that time. and I gave it to a friend of mine and said, like, man, you got to read this book because it'll help you understand sort of like what I'm feeling right now. And he read it and was like, I'll fucking get it. And that's fair because he was obviously not going through that sort of thing, and so it couldn't connect to him in the same way. And both interpretations of that book and both reactions to that book are perfectly valid. It's just, sometimes we just happen to be going through something where it makes a piece of art bigger or more what it is, more of what it is, or I don't know.
No, I get what you're talking about. I don't get what I mean. Yeah. Yeah, because nobody experiences the same thing the same way. And like you say, depending on where you are, and like I said, like maybe I was particularly vulnerable. I don't really remember. It was quite a while ago. But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it though. I don't think you had the same kind of roller coaster as I did. But I am glad to hear that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I certainly wouldn't. I don't regret having read it at all.
It's not the Turner Diaries.
It's not the Turner Diaries. The bar by which we will compare everything, I guess. At least it didn't go there. Yeah. But no, I enjoyed reading it, and this sort of caps off our summer look at children's books, which has been an interesting experiment. I think next episode we will be endeavoring to go live and do kind of a wrap up of our summer reading program. We'll look back on the children's books that we've read and what we take away from it, and maybe what we've learned on this journey.
Grown-ups sure are different.
Do you have right? Yeah. Do you have much more to say about The Little Prince?
No, not really. I liked it. The life of the author is super interesting. The timing of the book is tragic, with him never seeing it in his home country, never seeing the war end. I mean, the dude ran away from his home to fight his own country, basically to fight for the things that he believed were right, and never got to see that come to, what's the word, fruition? Is that just like, is fruition just like a
put it like that? Now
is that what it's spelled?
Now I'm
Ruition? Fruition? Okay.
Yeah, I believe it is.
So it's like, it is basically like the fruits, but fruition was just too weird to say, so we just had to say it fruition. Okay.
I'm sure that's what it was, as they were sitting there at the table coming up with words. We've invented the word fruition, sir, but we just think it's weird to say. You have any thoughts?
Sorry, I cut.
Fruition!
I cut you off. You were saying, after I said it the way that I said it, you were saying something.
Oh, we're talking about the life of the author, and like I never got to see the end of Nazi Germany, and like blah blah blah. I was like, well, so when you put it like that, it really does make the story seem especially sad.
Because he wrote this.
When you look at it, at the core of the book being about this idea that grown-ups are focused on the wrong priorities, and really, what is war but like taking the wrong priorities to the extent that you're willing to murder people over them? And so that this guy never got to see the end of those sorts of wrong priorities, and again, never get to see his book about embracing the right priorities released in his home country, which he loved, and letting his people, who I guess he must have loved as well, experience that story of what he thought were more important priorities. So that's now I'm bummed out. It's okay.
But I think that's it. Yeah, so you can catch us September 13th. We'll be discussing this book, all the other children's books that we've done, basically just the podcast up to this point. So if you would like to join us on Podbean for that, you're welcome to call in. You can ask us questions over text if you have the Podbean app, and you can call in as well.
You can also call in if you have the Podbean app. We would love to talk to listeners live. That's sort of one of the highlights. We don't always get a lot of callers, but it is sort of one
that's
of my
kind of the
do,
main reason we want to do the lives, is to have that interaction. So if you've got anything to say at all, call us and say it.
Yeah, and so that'll be 7 p.m.,
right?
7
p.m. September 13th. That's a Monday.
Yes. Until then, if you want to check out more of our stuff, some of our merch, or ways to support us, you can go to the website blahblahblahmedia.com. That's BLAHBLAHBLAH media.com. You can support us via Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, or through some of our cool merch available. You can go pick up a Go Read a Fucking Book t-shirt, maybe a mug. There's definitely throw pillows that say Go Read a Fucking Book. I would say maybe a fun contest if people want to do this. Like, go buy a Go Read a Fucking Book throw pillow and just find different places in your community where you can like sneak that throw pillow in. Like, maybe leave one in a store, in a mall, like on a sofa there, or just find some places where you can just sort of hide these things. I guess it's a lot of money to just take something and abandon somewhere, but if you felt like doing something fun, maybe you don't have to leave it there. Just take a picture of it on a sofa in the bay, and then take a picture and then bring it home with you.
That would be fun.
But that's about it for me.
So this has been When Bad Things Happen to Good People. I'm Oren Barter.
I'm Todd Sullivan.
And thanks for listening. And as always, go read a fucking book.